Our chapel speaker today is Ron Barnes. We've heard from him several times over the last couple of years. We know him well. He's had a significant impact for the Lord in ministry, but his real claim to fame around Piedmont is that he happens to be the dad of Tori and Sophie. So that's what gives him creds here. But I might as well also mention that he is the director of Source of Light Ministries. They have an international impact. They have a display. You'll hear a little bit more about that and what they do. We used their resources that were available to us as missionaries in the West Indies. We used it extensively. It helped us so much in our discipleship and reaching out to help train people in our church and also in places in other areas across the West Indies. Ron served as a youth pastor, head counselor, missionary. He was a strategic coordinator to Asia. He has been instrumental in starting a Bible college or Bible school in Hungary, as well as an annual Good Shepherd Conference, which trains elders and church leaders. He has been active in church planting, mentoring of church planters and pastors. He's married to Brenda. They have 3 children. 2 of them are here. Welcome, Ron Barnes.
Well, 2 are taken. So if one of the 3 that's available, you want to talk to me about it, I'd be happy. She told me she'd kill me if I did that, but I told her, you can't be a part of my inner circle and not get teased a little bit. Well, this is a Source of Light. For those of you that don't know, in this area from south of Virginia, we've been pretty much in churches all around this part of the country. You can see this is our mission statement. Basically, it's fairly simple what we're here to do, and that is to make disciples. I believe that's a great commission. For 20-something years, I've been pastoring, I've been church planning, but you can get the cart before the horse. The focus was never church planning. The focus was to make disciples. And you can start a lot of churches, and we're seeing it all around the world, all around the country in particular, that are being started and closing down at as quickly a rate because disciples aren't also being made. But one of the things that Source of Light does, besides discipleship, is we're involved very heavily church planning, evangelism, edifying believers, and of course, as Dr. Pettit mentioned, developing and distributing literature. Our focus is discipleship, so our materials are pre-evangelistic all the way through adult discipleship curriculum, as well as you'll see here, Bible college curriculum. All of the materials that we make available in print form, which by the way we do in Madison, as well as 8 locations around the globe. We also make it available in MP3. We make it available in Braille. We do all the Brailing right there in Madison. Anything that we can print, we can put in Braille. We're developing our online programs so that our courses, all of them, will be available through electronic format. We're in 5 regions throughout Africa, Asia, North America, South America. Man, this thing has a really fast trigger. We're involved in all of the things that any other mission agency that have come through here before. You know, before I came to Source of Light, I was with a different organization, what they called a church planning organization. But in order to do ministry, it takes a lot of people, a lot of approach, and a lot of ministry. And so we're involved in any of the things that you see up here. We're constantly looking for help. We're looking for a new and younger generation to come alongside of us, and maybe if you're at all interested in pursuing ministry and missions, whether it's in North America or another part of the world, come and talk to me. I'll save a little bit of time afterwards, and I'll be here over the next 3 days. I wanted to time my chapel speaking so I could actually watch some basketball games. So guys, don't let me down tomorrow, okay? Is it tomorrow? All right. And girls. Yeah, I know I was going to get in trouble with that. You know, there's always someone I'm going to get in trouble with. But anyway, so if you'd like to talk more, don't think that the end of chapel is the end of it. I'll be available. Set up a time. You can stop by my display. You can get one of my business cards if you got a zip out. And on the bottom is my cell phone number. You can text me and say, could we meet? All right? At the end of chapel, if you don't have to zip away, I'd like to spend about 5 minutes if you're interested in a trip to Haiti. My son and I were in Haiti when the hurricane hit, and we just really sensed that this year was the year to visit Haiti. We're going to be doing children's VBS as well as youth rallies from June 1st to the 12th, and it'll be an exciting opportunity. A lot of open doors. I'll tell you, sometimes, I know a lot of you are involved in youth and children's ministry, and sometimes it's discouraging because you're like, these kids, they don't even really care. They just come here for the social, get together. But it'll be amazing when you sit down and you see people who are actually hungry to hear what you have to say. And so I promise you can talk to any of the girls that have made the trip last year, the last couple of years. The environment is very similar. But if you'd like to talk about it, I'll be sitting over here for 5 minutes after chapel or more, and we can talk about it. If you can't stay, take my business card, send me a text. We'll set up another time. Well, I have a few minutes left here, and I wanted to share with you something that really was on my heart after some recent trips. I have to tell you, God gives me some amazing opportunities to travel, and on the front lines of stuff. And it's funny. I was doing a little bit of a survey recently because there is so much opposition to the gospel, so much opposition to what we're doing. I discovered something even about the short amount of times that I make trips overseas. Nearly 40% of the time 40% of the trips that I travel on, I'm in a car accident. I've never been in a car accident here in the U.S., but about 40% of the trips that I'm on, when people are saying, I'm praying for a safe trip, I'm really thankful for that. Because what would happen if, they've never been major, but it's amazing to me that there's such a high occurrence of these car accidents on these trips that I make. But it pales in comparison to the sacrifice of the guys that I work with on a regular basis. I'd been preaching in one of the Central African countries about a year and a half ago when you probably can't see it very well, but it's up there. There's this little bitty cell phone that sits in my office. If you come to my office and visit, you can see it. It's kind of an old, junky phone. You're like, why in the world would that be on display? Well, there's a lot of things on my display, things that, that are meaningful for me. One of our missionaries got saved in prison, and so I have a Tupperware from Manila correctional facility, all these opportunities that I've been in. I've got all these neat things that line my walls. Most of it's junk to the rest of the world, but to me, has a lot of significance. Well, that little cell phone that you see up there was given to me as a gift. And it's not worth anything. It's probably one of the oldest cell phones you've ever seen. It was grungy and worn out. But I had been teaching in a 5-day conference of pastors. And I have to tell you, sometimes when I preach, I am exhausted. And on this 5th day, it was the last day of the conference, and I just gave everything. And it was one of those opportunities. I was drenched in sweat. I was just dripping sweat. I was so hot. I was so tired. And really, all I wanted to do was get in the van. And the van, it didn't even have air conditioning. But I knew as soon as we were going about 25 miles an hour, suddenly I'd get cooled off a little bit. And so I start to make my way to the Jeep. The van, Jeep, whatever it was. And as I start to get in, this man comes up to me, he's a Sudanese refugee, and he came up to me and says, can you just wait here just 1 minute? He said, I'll be right back, I promise. And if you've traveled to Africa, you realize African time time is very relative. And I said, we could be here a while. And so I sat there and I watched this guy as far as he could run. I saw dust behind him. I thought, we're going to be here a long time. And then the dust dissipated, and all I saw was empty, open road. So we sat there probably 15 minutes. And once again in the distance, I could see dust stirring up. And this guy got closer and closer and closer. And when he came up, he pulled out and handed in front of me, he handed me the cell phone. And he said, Pastor, nobody has ever come to teach us. He said, I'm a pastor of this little village church. He says, but the only training I've ever had is your basic courses. And so I've never had the level of Bible training that you've had. What you've given me is more than I've ever had in my life. And he said, I don't have very much. See, when you're a refugee, you bring the clothes on your back and it doesn't last long. The only thing you have to eat is what the World Food Program feeds you, and you're not allowed to earn an income. So these people have no money. And so this man was so touched by the offering that I had given in just days and days of teaching that he sacrificed the very best thing that he had to offer to me. And you look at it and it's a piece of junk. But it represented the very best he had to offer. In Romans chapter 12, there's a discussion about sacrifice. And I'm going to ask you to turn to there. Where we read these words from Romans chapter 12, 1 and 2. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. I was just telling Dr. Pettit and a story about a recent trip I'd made to India just 2 weeks ago. And these guys that we were teaching, I got a picture yesterday of the pastor I'd taught 2 weeks ago. And he's standing naked in the street with his wife and his baby because these religious radical Hindus are persecuting his family and forced him to stand and publicly shame himself. And I got so many stories like this, I can't even begin. These are not exaggerations of the truth. I just showed him a picture of it. But I began to wrestle with God. I began to wrestle with God, and I began to say, God, I've given you my family. I've served these 25 years with all my heart, all my life. But God, why do I get to go home? I'll pour out my life, I'll teach them, I'll train them, but these guys have to stay and they have to endure this, and many will pay for the cause of Christ with their own life. And I began to realize it was almost like God was using this passage to speak to me to say, some sacrifice is harder than others. And I realized my sacrifice is not to give my life up once. I want to challenge you to think about this morning. If God were to call and any one of us and ask us to give our life once, it would be tragic. But I want to challenge you this morning that it's even harder for us to give up our lives daily. That pastor that I mentioned, he's going to get dressed today. He's going to put his clothes back on. And with dignity, he's going to get back in the Word. He's going to get back in his pulpit. He's going to preach the gospel like he did every day. And I want to challenge you this morning. Maybe God is asking for more from you. I didn't preach the sermon, but I was talking to a small group. They asked in this conference that I was at last week, they asked me what I thought about sacrifice today. And so I got up and I gave this testimony. I referred to this particular passage. And then I had another young missionary follow me. And my jaw dropped at what he didn't get about what I just said. He said, yeah, I understand sacrifice. He goes, when I went to college to play football, I had to sacrifice time with my friends so I could work out in the gym, so I could be better at my game. He said, man, and then now as an adult, now I'm in missions, and so sometimes, I got to still sacrifice my time in the gym so I can go down to that coffee shop and have time with talking with guys. And my wife was sitting there in the crowd, and she told me afterwards, she says, I was really proud of you. I said, oh yeah? She said, because you didn't react to that. I said, oh, I was reacting. I was reacting because this kid didn't get it. That's not what this passage is talking about. Paul took this responsibility very seriously. It was very personal to him when he shared this passage about being a living sacrifice. You see, he felt compelled to share with these Roman believers these two challenges that I'm going to leave with you just over the next few minutes. First of all, he challenged them to leave what's comfortable. And actually, ironically, he had something to base that on. Sometimes when we ask somebody to do something, it's very convenient if we haven't had to do it ourselves. We're really good at that. We're really good at keeping other people busy with things that we don't necessarily want to do. But Paul used a very interesting phrase about getting them to leave what is comfortable. You see, when he said just a moment ago, I beseech you, therefore. Very interesting word that he chose. That word parakaleo. And so he wasn't just crying out, but interestingly enough, he said, I'm calling you alongside of me. I'm calling you. I'm not asking you to do something I haven't done myself. I understand what sacrifice is, and I'm asking you to join me in it. That's exactly what Paul was challenging the Roman believers. See, by this time in his life and his ministry, and it was going to get worse from here, but by this, in Acts 9, he'd already had to escape Tarsus for his own safety. He'd already been stoned in Acts 14. He'd already been imprisoned in Acts 16. And really what he was saying to them is, guys, I get it. I get what I'm asking you to do is going to cost a lot. But if you're really going to be a living sacrifice, and that is dying daily to what you want for yourself and offering up everything that you can, everything you have to offer, the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to leave what's comfortable. You're going to have to leave what's comfortable. This picture that keeps just wanting to come up is a picture from last spring. No, this fall. They all start to run together after a while. And I was in another Central African country that had, in the last few years, just escaped a civil war. And it was extremely, extremely violent. And our director of our ministries there said, this man could really use some encouragement. He's in a tough area. Could we drive up? If you guys follow me on social media, you've seen some of these pictures. I got in the car. It was a Mercedes. They put me in this Mercedes. But every light was lit up on this car. You know, like the lights that say, this isn't working right, this isn't working right, this isn't... Every light. So if you follow me on Instagram, you can go back and find that day that every light was lit. And I thought, this is going to be an interesting 8-hour trip. And so I packed my bag. I left my stuff in my hotel room, but I packed my bag because I was thinking, they said it's an 8-hour trip, we probably want to stay overnight. So I went up just to encourage one of our church planners and spend some time with his dear family and his church. And they met on a Monday. They normally meet Sunday. They did meet that Sunday, but they also met on Monday because they were so excited. Nobody comes to visit them. Missionaries don't live in the part of the country that they are because it's dangerous. And so I didn't know how dangerous it was, to be honest. You know, sometimes it's like when people say, "What's the worst thing you've ever eaten?" I don't know. I really don't know because a lot of times I don't want to know. So sometimes I go into some of these things and I'm just like, afterwards I'm kind of glad that I didn't know. All right. But anyway, so we show up at this church. I preach, I teach for about 3 hours. I spend some time just praying with and praying over our church planner there. And they said, you better get going. I said, no, I'm fine. It was hot, but I thought they were referring to maybe it was getting hot or something. You better start to head back. I said, okay, why? I thought we were staying here, so I was looking over to my director for the country, and he said, yeah, we were talking, and there's some movement around this area, this compound where the church is built, because they've discovered there's a white guy in town, and they don't see white guys. And in this area, during the war, during the conflict, there was a lot of killing. He says, matter of fact, this building that you see was the headquarters for the opposition to the military, to the government. This building, we got it because it was a structure that could house a church. But our missionaries had to go in, and they had to clean bodies out of this building, out of the compound. They had to take body parts and gather them up. And they said, this is the problem. We know we were talking about maybe you staying here tonight, but first of all, This is the most lawless region in this country. These guys are robbers and they're thieves. They were anti-government rebels, and we can't change who they are. It is why we came, but for you to be here, first of all, it could become more dangerous for us, all right? But even the hotel we were talking about putting you in, there's only one hotel in town. They will rob you. He goes, but even worse, it could be more dangerous than that, because they have this belief that was kind of resurged during the conflict, that if you eat the body parts of a human being, and particularly a white person, bullets will bounce off of you. An animistic teaching that taught them that. And so that's what all of these bodies were around. They were trying to fortify themselves so that they could fight the government army. And so he said, we just think it'd be better if you didn't stay. And he had to find me, after he'd worded that, because I'm in the back of the car already, No, it wasn't really that bad. But I had a long 8-hour drive back once again, challenged by the Lord when Paul said, offer yourselves as a living sacrifice. That's what this guy does on a daily basis. You saw the picture. He had his wife. He had his children. He took his children to that environment. But when you leave what is comfortable and you open yourself up to live sacrificially, this is the type of commitment that the Lord is asking and wanting from us. There's a second part of this passage that says we offer ourselves a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable. And I think we sometimes lose sight of what holy and acceptable. We've lowered the bar on acceptable, haven't we? I realize I'm speaking to college students and even professors. Professors, you know what the difference between, all right, this is C work and this is A work. Okay, they did the very bare minimum to get this done. I remember doing that sometimes when I was taking the Greek classes. I have to be honest, I'm going to offend somebody. I'm not even going to say what class I really, just didn't do, But to do Greek, I had to give up some time in some of my other classes because I couldn't get it done right. So you guys understand, what I'm talking about. But in this case, when Paul says to offer yourselves a living sacrifice that's holy and acceptable, there are very few exceptions about what would be acceptable as a sacrifice. And it wasn't mediocrity. It was never mediocrity. And I think over and over and over in our lives, that's what we keep offering God. We give God whatever's left in our day, whatever is left in our time. We don't offer the very best. I'm not a rich person. But just yesterday, we have a friend that's gone through a crisis, pastor friend. He got dropped by his church. He basically forced to resign. And I just told my wife, we got to help him. Actually, she told me that because we're always on the same wavelength on stuff like this. And we don't have the money. We're not rich. That's not the gift God's gifted us, equipped us. But sometimes you just make a sacrifice. All right. It wasn't comfortable. But we knew it was the right thing. And when God says, I want you to offer yourselves as a living sacrifice, that means daily it's something you have to give up. It means holy and acceptable means it's the very best that you have to offer of you. And I see my time is fleeting. But that's my encouragement to you. This is not just Paul's encouragement. This is your challenge. This is a challenge to you to offer up your lives as a living sacrifice, something you're going to have to do every day. It's a choice you're going to have to make every day. And you're going to have to ask God, listen, what is this costing me? Do you think it's really a sacrifice if it didn't cost you anything? Is it costing you time in the gym? Is it costing you maybe not as much Starbucks as you'd like, as Fuzzies or Wuzzies or whatever the coffee place is, I mean, putting these things off, is that really offering the very best sacrifice you have to offer? I think we want to give God little parts of our life. Right? You can have this part, but you can't have the whole thing. And I'm going to close with this last thought. I remember doing this as a young missionary. I remember telling God, I remember having this conversation and how selfish it was. But I'd already committed to the Lord that I was going to serve Him. We were all going to move and we were going to go live over in Hungary, if you don't know that part of our story. And I remember I was in a church service and I was a part of a conference. And all of a sudden I come under such great conviction because I realized what I had consciously told God is, you can have every part of my life, you can try me, you can test me, but let me ask just one thing. Don't use my family. I'd given every part of my life to God, but I just wanted to hold back to my family. Almost as though to say, God, I'll take care of them. Or don't cause any danger to happen to them as a way to get a hold of me. But I realized then and there that was a mistake, because God would be a better daddy to them. He'd be a better husband. And if I was truly going to leave what's comfortable and to live sacrificially, I had to give everything I had to offer. And so my challenge to you, I want to tell you, I want to encourage you that less is only going to leave you uncomfortable. You're going to try to hold on to little parts on your own, but God is in charge, and He will handle your life so much better if you will offer it in its entirety to Him. Well, with that, I'll close, and I'll turn it over to whoever's speaking next. I don't know if that's you or... But if you'd like to talk, as I said, I'll be here the next couple of days. I'd be happy to chat with you. I'll stay after chapel. If you'd like to talk about the trip to Haiti, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. If you can't, stop by my display, take a card. We'll set up another time to meet. But let me close my time with a word of